Hello everyone, Hussein here. In today's video, you will create a simple book API that uses Marshmallow library for validation, and then we will also explore on the basics of Flask's Blueprint API. So here is a little overview of how the API looks like. So for example, if I make a post request to um, my API slash book, and then I add the pages field, and then so it's basically telling me to add a simple object to my database. Okay, and then let's say I add another book. I call it Harry Potter. Okay, and then if I make a GET request to get all of my books, I should get the whole list of books that have been added to the database. Okay, and one thing I should mention is the database that we will be using today is just a simple array that will be stored in memory. Okay, and we're also going to use the Blueprint API. So now let's now learn the basics of how the Blueprint API works. Okay, so the Blueprint API is basically, let me give you an example. Okay, so let's say I have a car, a simple car, and these are its components. So for example, the tire, and we have a window. So blueprints are basically separate components of the app. So for example, the tires are a separate blueprint, the window of the vehicle are separate blueprint, the chassis is a separate blueprint. Okay, so all of these blueprints, they join together to form our app. Okay, so that's what blueprints are in a nutshell. So all in all, in shorter words, blueprints are a way of making your API code look more modular and more readable. So now that we have learned about the theory, it's now time to write code. Okay, so what I want you guys to do is in your create an empty project directory, and then in the command line, the first step would be to create your environment. So conduct create -n flask -book -API, and then we need to activate it. Okay, so now that we've activated it, we need to install our dependencies. So you do this by saying conda install -c conda -forge flask. And then since we're going to be using Marshmallow for validation, I'm going to install Marshmallow like so -forge Marshmallow. Okay, so now that we're done, let's create the basics of our API. Okay, so in your project directory, I want you to create an empty file called main.py, and then if you haven't already, and then let's try to run our API. Then I'm gonna create an instance of my class. And then let's now try running it. Flask app. Okay, so let's see if everything runs fine. Of course, I don't expect a response because we don't have an endpoint. Let's see. Okay, now let's create an empty route or an index route. App.route / and then def index. Okay, so of course I'm going to do a return. Welcome to the book API, and then I'm going to enable the debugger. Awesome, so it runs well. And then the next step is to create our blueprint. Sorry, not our blueprint. Our next step is to create a schema. Okay, so here in your project directory, create an empty file called book schema.py. So basically this schema will be used to validate our input, the request body, which is our input. Okay, so here, so from Marshmallow, import fields, comma schema, and then I'm gonna now start creating my schema. Okay, so class book schema, and then schema. So our schema will accept two fields. First of all will be title, which will be of type string, and this will be mandatory, query equals to true, fix it. And then it will accept another field called pages of type integer or number in Python. Okay, awesome. And then I'm gonna export a couple of my schema instances, which is gonna be book schema is equals to book schema. So this variable or this instance is gonna try to validate my validate on a single object, and then another one called multiple book schema, which will try to give us the serialized output if the input is the collection of books. So you're gonna know what I mean by that later on in this video. Okay, so now our next step is to create the database. So since I mentioned before, the database will be an empty stack of an array. Okay, and for the database we're going to create another file called db.py. So first of all we initialize a stack, an empty stack, and then here I'm going to add two helper functions called def add title comma pages. So what this will do, it will take my array and then append it, and then append an object. So it's gonna have this field, title will be the value will be title, pages, the value will be pages. Okay, then I'm going to create another endpoint, no sorry, I'm going to create another helper function which will be remove. It won't accept anything, and then all it will do is just remove or pop from the stack. Okay, that's it. Now our next step is to create a blueprint, and for the blueprint I'm gonna make a separate file. Let's call it book blueprint.py. Okay, so I'm gonna do from Flask import blueprint. So I'm gonna this just tells Flask that this file is going to be a blueprint module, and then request to get the request body. And then of course I'm going to, since we'll be using validation, I'm going to import my book schema as well. Import book schema, and then multiple book schema. Then from my database I'm gonna import my helper functions, and then the stack itself. Awesome. So first of all, let's initialize the book API. So book API is equals to blueprint book API, then the name of my API, the import name of my API. So what I'm gonna do first is I'm gonna try to test it. So here I'm gonna first create a simple route, book API dot route, let's do get instead, slash book, and then def book index. So if the user navigates to slash book, this will be the handling function, return you are in the index directory of books. Okay, so all we now need to do is to try to register this blueprint. Registering is a really easy process. So to register it, what I'm gonna do is this, and then to register it, I'm gonna do app.register underscore blueprint. Then this will be my blueprint. Now let's save and let's try to run it. So the index directory should work. And what about book? Awesome. So it works. Okay. Now let's try to create a function that will add books or a book object to my API, to my stack. So to do so, we're gonna do book API dot post slash book, and then def. So this will be my handling function. So what I'm gonna do first is use a try block. So what it's gonna do is I'm now gonna try to validate my request body. So try data, create a variable called data, and then use my book schema to validate the request body. Not validate, we're gonna load. So this just loads or validates the request body, the request.json. And then as test, we're gonna print it right now. And then I'm gonna return a little something, message, the request is valid. Now of course I'm gonna catch as well. Sorry, it's not JavaScript. Except exception err, and then print the error, then return message you might have not entered data correctly. So since this is a bad request, I'm gonna send the status code of bad request. So let's try running this code. So I'm gonna do a post request, and so I have my request body over here, and then let's try running it. Awesome. So it says the request is valid, which means this works. And what if I miss out pages? So then it shouldn't run, right? Yeah, it doesn't run at all. Awesome. So since we know this works, what I'm gonna do is instead of this function, I'm gonna run my add function to add stuff to the stack. So add data, and then the first one, the first property, which is title, and then now we have pages. So data pages, we need to add another condition. So what I need to do is check if pages is there. If pages is there, then this property will enter. Otherwise I want to input 0. Okay, this is what's gonna happen. And then I'm gonna return the latest item in the stack, which will be the data that was just entered. Stack length of stack -1. Let's try running it. Okay, so since we don't have anything, now I'm gonna do pages 100. Then let's try running it. Awesome. So it runs. Let's add another book. Great, it runs as well. And yeah, I realized that we need data pages. So let's remove this condition. Since data pages is always mandatory, we don't need that condition. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this function. Let's now create another endpoint that returns all the books in the database. So to do so, book API again dot get, okay, /book/all. So this endpoint, if the user goes to this endpoint, they're gonna get all of the books in the database. So let's do it. So I'm gonna do def get all books, and then data is equals to book schema dot dump So basically serialize all of the objects and then send the data. Since we'll have multiple objects in this collection, we're going to use multiple book schema. Okay, anyway, so dump and then everything in my stack. Then all we do is return it. So let's see if it works. First I'm going to post some books. Another book is okay, and then I'm going to do get book / all. So let's see if we have our books. Yeah, we have both of our books. Let's add another one. This time it's going to be a book of page 45. Then get. Yeah, awesome. So as you can see, the API is working fine. So last but not the least, we have another API, we have another endpoint. So book.get. Now this is going to delete. So delete /book, then def delete, and then so first of all we're gonna try to validate the stack. So let's say if the length of my stack is 0, which means if the stack is already empty, we can't delete further, right? So I'm gonna send an error message, return message stack was already empty. Okay, otherwise if it's not empty, then we're gonna remove. So data is book schema dot dump remove. So it's gonna take the stack, pop the latest item from the stack, and then it's gonna validate it, and then it's gonna be stored in the data variable. Okay, now all we need to do is return it. So let's see if it now works. So since first I'm gonna post some books to the database, 50, one more, and then I'm gonna get all of the books related in the database, and then let's try to delete them from the stack. Okay, yeah, so now let's run delete on it again, then let's get again. Awesome. And then let's delete once again, then we're gonna have an empty list as the response. Awesome, we have an empty list. Now let's try deleting it, and it should give us an error this time. Yeah, since the stack was empty, it can't do anything. Okay, and that is pretty much it. However, there's one more thing I need to add, return stack.pop. So it's now gonna return the latest item that was removed from the stack. So it's a little quality of life feature. Post book, so I'm gonna add a few books and then I'm gonna delete them. Yeah, so it works fine. Okay, and yeah, so we're done. In this video you learned how to integrate Blueprints and Marshmallow in your app, where we're using Blueprints to basically separate the routes in separate files and then making our code look more modular and more cleaner to read. Furthermore, we also use Marshmallow to validate the fields of the request body. So yeah, that's it for today. If you guys have any questions, please mention them in the comments and I'll check them out. Thank you and have a great day. Bye.